Deputy Rose Conway-Walsh.
Yeah, Garmagat, Chair, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for your contributions to the report as well. It's crucially important, and for giving your time to that. And I think one thing we recognise is that there's a bit of universal support for this. But obviously, the HEA bill and the specific student mobility, North-South student mobility in there, requires us all to step further. My first question is, what are the next steps that should be taken by the HEA and the Affairs Department to increase the numbers of cross-border enrolments? Secondly, while colleges should be financially capable of conducting their own research, is there also a benefit to the HEA and Ferris and the Department of Economy in the North to centrally coordinate the outreach, explaining the different systems of the CAO and of SUSI in the South? How great an impact does the time imbalances there have? And I would suggest that the committee here should write to the State Examination Commission and to the Minister to highlight the issue that's there. And I just want to ask you, how many less applications would you think do the HEAs in the South receive as a result? And I know we'll have some indication of the figures in the last 2 years on that. The Central Application Office, the CEO, is a not-for-profit company established by the Higher Education Institute in the South. Can the IUA or the members of the HEIs make these changes that are needed or request a review of the current practices? And how do you think such a review and reform would be initiated? Could a solution specific to the North be considered based on promoting integration on the island, even if the wider approach of the A-levels is seen as operating fairly in relation to Britain? And the other one is, have you received a response to the proposal? I think that's a very good proposal that you made, the UI have made in terms of the proposal to the Minister and to the Permanent Secretary and the Department of the Economy. Have you received a response to that, and would you be able to share that response to the committee? And just finally, I really want to commend the work that's been done by the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. I watch that and I see how it's evolving, and I want to ask, and I know you have outlined some, but what do you specifically need, even in the short term, to ensure that that continues to grow? And can you provide more detail on the issue of the mutual recognition awards, particularly below the degree level? Garmagat. Trying to be as quick as I could.
Okay. Right, I'll try to remember that. So, and I started maybe in reverse order. So I think Paul will address the issue of the below degree level recognition. On the letter to the North-South Ministerial Council, that was just been sent. So we haven't yet received a response, and clearly it depends also on the what happens at Stormont and with the executive there, and how then the North-South Ministerial Council evolves in that context. But we think it's a particularly important initiative could be taken in the context of the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, that the scope of work would be extended, and education clearly has benefits that are cross community, so we think it's largely uncontroversial as well to have that as part of the work, but haven't yet received a response because it's just been sent that letter just sent last week. On the equivalence of recognition, so yes, the CAO is effectively the entry requirements, as I said in my response, are for universities to consider. So it's a bilateral as well, so I think it's not only for us, for the IUA members, but also for the members of the University of Ireland in the North to consider as how we translate A-levels and Leaving Cert vice versa. So I'd put that on the agenda of our next meeting, and we'll progress that. I've already spoken to our Registrar, Paul O'Doherty, who was the chair of the CAO and represents the University of Galway on the CAO, and he's open to that and thinking about how the original analysis was limited by not looking at, as I mentioned, at participation rates north and south and how that might change. I think you answered your question around what the next steps for the department are. I think that research and analysis would be very useful, and I think how we might work together in promoting the north-south mobility and where the key pinch points are, we think guidance counsellors are critical, and to find ourselves in schools across community where we could encourage guidance counsellors to think more and encourage students more to think about those options cross borders is the first. The second is, and Lewis mentioned this, is the investment that was committed to under Funding the Future, I think is critical for parity and of experience across both across the island of Ireland. And then thirdly, I think the department has a particular role to play also in that north-south ministerial element, and the minister would have a role to play there too. But the third piece is whether an Erasmus type funding programme would be considered. In other words, for students going from Ireland to the EU, they get Erasmus funding and scholarships. Whether there could be support for something similar north-south, I think would be very interesting to see whether it might be for a semester or for a year, but certainly would increase mobility, which would be the purpose of the report. So they're the three things. The research around what are the pinch points, the support through the North-South Ministerial Council and investment, particularly in
fairness, we do know what the pinch points are.
Yes.
We can only continue to look for so long at the pinch points.
Yes.
We have to look at who has the where does the responsibility lie for us to free up those pinch points.
Yeah.
Because and that's what we're trying to do as a committee here.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have an action report out of this.
Yeah, and I think you had particularly identified the kind of school presence, if you like. So to me, that's so we mentioned a lot of them. I think the cross-border equivalence is the other, and that's where the universities think about it, and we've committed to putting that on our agenda. But the pinch point to me that the department could think about is how do we encourage guidance counsellors in schools and have a sectoral or not just an institution but a sectoral approach to that. That the department and the HA could encourage.
Just maybe to follow on to that point first. The cluster has just put in place a competition for a cross-border engagement officer to do exactly what you're talking about, to actually identify the obstacles and remove them among the 4 partners in the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. If that happens and if it works, then that can be used elsewhere as well. There's no reason why not. So, you know, the 4 members of the cluster have come together, so the person appointed, hopefully within the next fortnight or so, will actually report to all 4 members of the cluster rather than one institution. So therefore there's a responsibility on them to identify where there are obstacles for each of the 4 partners, and I think that's really important in terms of how we move it forward. I think we can actually do that and then make the outcomes of that available to others into the university system as well. But it applies to everybody really. So if we can simplify the situation, identify the obstacles and provide ways of removing them, I think that's a really good piece of work. So this post has just been put in place for a 12-month period, really to trial it and see whether it works and whether it has an impact. And I think that is a direct outcome from the work of the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. And go back to your point about sub-degree work. In the past and currently as well, all of the further education colleges in Northern Ireland would have had higher education provision to a certain level, and then they would proceed to University of Ulster or to Queen's University to finish off their qualifications. What we did was identify with the Northwest Regional College specifically where they didn't have progression routes for students. So if they didn't have progression route into the University of Ulster in Derry, we offered the progression route in Letterkenny. So we therefore created an already a flow of students coming across the border from Northern Ireland back into the Republic to top off their actual degree programmes. And that's worked very effectively on a number of different areas, and it can be expanded to other areas. One area we're looking at the moment is the whole area of electric vehicles. And actually, amazingly, the Department of the Economy in Northern Ireland has come on board to fund that in the last couple of weeks. So that's really interesting in that we put a bridging programme in place to allow students coming from Northern Ireland, totally funded through a programme provided by ourselves and by Northwest Regional College, to move into a degree programme in ATU Donegal. So those things are possible, and it's just if you get the right people together in the right place at the right time, you can make it work. So what we're trying to do through the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster is to continue to promote good practice and best way forward. Now we're running on fumes at the moment in terms of making this happen. Like it was back in 2018 when this was set up initially. It was funded through the HEA landscape funding, and then on some funding, additional funding came through in the second phase of that. And then we had some funding from the TUTF as the university established the ATU. But we really need some bridging funding to keep that going and keep the momentum going around it. And I'm very conscious, as the person with responsibility for cross-border collaboration from the university's perspective, that this needs to be a central plank of our ongoing strategy. And I think the university is very committed to that, and the work of the cluster will drive that activity.
Great. human experiment, isn't it? I just think it's really, really valuable in terms of transitioning that across the island as well, in terms of what's been done in the Northwest.
I want to call in the other speakers. We have a session number 2 as well, so. No, you can go ahead briefly, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just in response to Deputy Conway-Walsh's question about immediate steps, the most important thing, in my opinion, and I fully support the remarks made by my colleagues, would be for the Department of Education here to signal very, very clearly that the ongoing delays with the Leaving Cert, the publication of the Leaving Cert results, will be remedied. It's probably too late for 2023, but those signals need to go out now to encourage students who will be doing their A-level exams in Northern Ireland and elsewhere in 2024, and with a commitment to an improved timeline. They also need to outline very clearly, as all other European Union countries have done, and the various jurisdictions within, or education systems within the various parts of the UK, that they will bring back the profile of Leaving Cert grade results to a pre-COVID norm. That has happened across the rest of the countries. So, and this is important in the context of rebalancing A-level equivalences to Leaving Cert points, because in a fluctuating situation where the Leaving Cert points continue to be inflated, in inverted commas, it's very unfair for applicants applying with other types of systems. And we have no indication yet from the Department of Education when the Leaving Cert points will return to a pre-COVID normality, or indeed if they ever will. And it's very difficult to calibrate between two different systems in that complete absence.
Thank you.